The train whistle pierced through the scorching Arizona air at precisely 3 in the afternoon, same as it had done every single day for the past 90 days. And Owen Parker stood at the edge of the Old Tucson platform with his worn hat in his hands, watching passengers disembark with the same desperate hope that had brought him here every day since Olivia Langston had failed to arrive on that scorching June afternoon. The sun beat down mercilessly on the wooden platform, turning it into a griddle that most folks avoided during these blistering summer hours. But Owen had become a fixture here, as permanent as the weathered station sign itself. The station master, Henry Whitlow, had stopped asking him questions after the first 2 weeks, recognizing the particular brand of devotion that could only come from a man waiting for a woman who had captured his heart completely. Owen had met Olivia Langston 6 months prior when he had traveled to Santa Fe on business, delivering a herd of cattle for the ranch where he worked as foreman. She had been standing outside the general store, her dark hair caught in the wind, struggling with an armful of packages that threatened to tumble into the dusty street. He had rushed to help her, and when their eyes met, something fundamental had shifted in his chest, like tectonic plates rearranging themselves to accommodate something new and vital. She had smiled at him, a real smile that reached her green eyes and made them sparkle like creek water in sunlight, and he had been lost from that moment forward. They had spent 3 days together while he completed his business in Santa Fe. 3 days that felt like a lifetime and a heartbeat all at once. They walked along the Santa Fe River, talked until the stars came out, shared meals at the boarding house where she was staying temporarily while helping her elderly aunt recover from a broken leg. Olivia had been a schoolteacher in Missouri, but had come west to help family, and she spoke of the frontier with a mixture of trepidation and excitement that Owen found captivating. She was educated, well-spoken, and possessed a quick wit that kept him on his toes. More than that, she was kind in a way that seemed rare and precious, stopping to help a young boy who had scraped his knee, speaking gently to a stray dog that looked half-starved. On their last evening together, as the sun painted the adobe buildings in shades of orange and pink, Owen had taken both her hands in his and asked her to come to Old Tucson. He had a good job, a steady income, and enough money saved to build a proper home. He wanted to marry her, to build a life together in the Arizona territory. The words had tumbled out of him in a rush, propelled by the fear that if he let her leave without securing some promise, some connection, he would never see her again. Olivia had looked at him with tears in her eyes and said yes. Yes, she would come. Yes, she felt what he felt. Yes, she wanted to build a life with him. They had agreed that she would need 3 months to settle her aunt's affairs and make arrangements to leave Missouri permanently. 3 months to gather her belongings, say her goodbyes, and make the journey to Arizona territory. Owen had written down the exact date, June 15th, and they had agreed she would arrive on the afternoon train. He had kissed her goodbye at the Santa Fe station, a chaste but meaningful kiss that promised everything they would share once reunited, and then he had watched her board the stage that would take her back to her aunt's home and eventually to Missouri. The ride back to Old Tucson had been torture. Owen had never been a particularly romantic man before meeting Olivia. He had focused on his work, on building his reputation as a reliable foreman, on saving money and staying out of trouble. But she had awakened something in him, some capacity for feeling that he had not known existed. He found himself thinking about her constantly, remembering the way she laughed, the thoughtful expression that crossed her face when she was considering something seriously, the gentle touch of her hand. He had told his boss, Samuel Richmond, about his plans to marry, and Samuel had been supportive, even generous. He had offered Owen a piece of land on the edge of the ranch property where he could build a house, and had given him time off to work on the construction. Owen had thrown himself into building their home with a fervor that bordered on obsession. Every nail he hammered, every board he cut, was an act of love and anticipation. He built a sturdy two-room house with a proper floor and a stone fireplace. He constructed a covered porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sunset. He even planted a small garden, though he knew precious little about growing things, because Olivia had mentioned loving fresh vegetables. The other ranch hands had teased him good-naturedly about his lovesick behavior, but they had also helped him with the construction, recognizing genuine feeling when they saw it. By early June, the house was complete, modest but solid and filled with promise. Owen had purchased furniture from the general store, simple pieces that were nonetheless carefully chosen. A real bed with a proper mattress, a table and chairs, a rocking chair for the porch. He had even splurged on a set of dishes with tiny blue flowers painted on them, because they had reminded him of something Olivia might like. June 15th had arrived with perfect weather, clear skies and moderate temperatures. Owen had ridden into town hours early, too excited to wait at the ranch. He had worn his best clothes, had his hair cut, even purchased a small bouquet of wildflowers from a Mexican woman who sold them near the plaza. He had stood on that platform with his heart hammering in his chest, watching the eastern horizon for the first sign of the train's approach. But Olivia had not been on that train. Owen had watched every passenger disembark, his smile fading as the platform emptied and she did not appear. He had checked with the conductor, described her carefully, asked if perhaps she had missed her stop or been delayed. The conductor had been sympathetic but certain. No woman matching that description had been aboard. Owen had tried to fight the panic rising in his chest. There could be 1,000 reasonable explanations. She could have missed her connection, been delayed by weather, fallen ill and postponed her journey. He told himself not to worry, that she would arrive on the next train. The trains ran 3 times a week, so he would return in 2 days and she would be there, apologetic about the delay but safe and sound. But she had not been on the next train either, or the one after that. Days turned into weeks, and still Owen returned to the station every single time a train arrived from the east. He sent telegrams to Santa Fe, asking if anyone had seen Olivia Langston, but received no useful responses. He wrote letters to the boarding house where she had stayed, but they were returned undelivered, the establishment having closed down. He tried to locate information about her aunt in Santa Fe, but his inquiries led nowhere. It was as if Olivia had vanished into thin air. The people of Old Tucson began to notice his daily vigil. At first they were curious, then sympathetic, then concerned. Some suggested that perhaps she had changed her mind, that he should accept she was not coming and move on with his life. But Owen could not believe that. He had seen the look in her eyes, heard the sincerity in her voice. Olivia would come if she could. If she had not arrived, it meant something had prevented her, and he would wait until she could make the journey or until he received definitive word that she never would. His boss Samuel had been understanding, allowing Owen to arrange his work schedule so he could meet every train. The other ranch hands stopped teasing and started looking worried. His friend Marcus, who worked as a wrangler on the same ranch, tried several times to convince Owen to give up the vigil, but Owen refused. He could not explain the certainty he felt, the deep conviction that Olivia would come. It was not rational or logical, but it was absolute. The house Owen had built sat empty, waiting. Sometimes he would ride out there in the evenings and sit on the porch, imagining what it would be like when Olivia finally arrived and he could bring her home. He kept it clean and ready, as if she might appear at any moment. The blue flowered dishes remained carefully stacked in the cupboard he had built. The bed was made with crisp sheets. Everything was prepared for her arrival. By August, 3 months after the date she was supposed to have arrived, Owen had begun to look gaunt. He was not sleeping well, and the constant anxiety was wearing on him physically. He still performed his duties at the ranch with his usual competence, but the spark had gone out of him. He moved through his days mechanically, saving his energy and hope for those moments on the station platform when the train would arrive, and he could scan the passengers for Olivia's face. September brought slightly cooler temperatures and the beginning of the rainy season. Owen stood on the platform in drizzle and downpour alike, his hat pulled low against the weather. Henry Whitlow, the station master, began bringing him coffee on the particularly cold or wet days, a small kindness that Owen appreciated even though he rarely remembered to thank him properly. His entire world had narrowed to this single point of focus, this daily ritual of waiting and hoping and trying not to despair. On September 15th, exactly 3 months after Olivia should have arrived, Owen stood on the platform as the afternoon train pulled in with its usual cacophony of steam and squealing brakes. He no longer held flowers. He no longer wore his best clothes. His shirt was faded from sun and washing, his boots were scuffed, and his face bore the lines of someone who had not smiled genuinely in months. But he still held his hat in his hands, still watched each passenger with fierce attention. The first passengers off were a family, parents herding 3 small children toward the street where a wagon waited. Then an older gentleman in a suit, clearly a businessman of some kind. A young couple, newly married by the look of their matching gold rings and the way they clung to each other. Owen felt his hope dimming with each unfamiliar face, the same crushing disappointment he had experienced dozens of times before beginning to settle over him like a heavy blanket. Then he saw her. Olivia stepped down from the passenger car with the assistance of the conductor, and Owen felt his heart stop beating entirely for a long moment, before it resumed with a painful, lurching rhythm that made his chest ache. She looked thinner than he remembered, and there were shadows under her eyes that spoke of exhaustion and hardship. Her traveling dress was dusty and worn, and she carried only a single small trunk, far less luggage than one would expect for someone relocating permanently. But it was her, unmistakably her, and she was here. She stood on the platform looking around uncertainly, and Owen realized she had not seen him yet. He tried to move to call out to her, but his legs felt like they had been nailed to the wooden boards beneath his feet, and his voice seemed to have abandoned him entirely. It was the longest 3 seconds of his life, watching her from 20 feet away, terrified that she might somehow disappear again before he could reach her. Then her eyes found his, and the transformation in her expression was immediate and profound. Relief, joy, and something that looked heartbreakingly like gratitude flooded her face. She took a step toward him, then another, and suddenly they were both moving, closing the distance between them as if pulled by an invisible force. Owen reached her first, dropping his hat carelessly to the platform as his hands came up to frame her face, needing to touch her to confirm she was real. Tears were streaming down Olivia's cheeks, and her hands clutched at his shirt as if afraid he might vanish. "You are here," she said, her voice breaking on the words. "You are actually here. I thought I was so afraid that you would not, that you would have given up." "Every day," Owen said, his own voice rough with emotion. "I have been here every single day, Olivia, every single train." She made a sound that was half sob, half laugh, and Owen could not wait another second. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest, feeling her shake with tears and exhaustion. She smelled like train smoke and dust, and something floral that he remembered from Santa Fe, and she was solid and real in his arms after 3 months of aching absence. "I am so sorry," Olivia whispered against his shirt. "I am so sorry I am late. I tried to send word, but I could not. Everything went wrong, and I thought I would never make it here." "You are here now," Owen said firmly, pulling back just enough to look at her face. "That is all that matters. You are here." Around them, the station was clearing as passengers collected their luggage and departed. Henry Whitlow was watching from his office window with undisguised satisfaction, and a few townspeople who had witnessed the reunion were smiling. But Owen was aware of nothing except the woman in his arms, the miracle of her presence after months of desperate waiting. "Can you tell me what happened?" he asked gently, reaching down to retrieve his hat with one hand while keeping the other firmly at Olivia's waist, as if she might disappear if he fully released her. "Where have you been? Why could you not send word?" Olivia took a shaky breath, wiping at her eyes with trembling fingers. "It is a long story, a terrible story, but I need to tell you everything, Owen. You deserve to know what kept me from you." "Come," Owen said, spotting her trunk where the conductor had set it on the platform. He picked it up with his free hand, noting how light it was with concern. "Let me take you somewhere we can talk properly. Are you hungry? When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning, I think," Olivia said, swaying slightly. "I ran out of money 2 days ago. I had to sell almost everything I owned just to afford the train fare, and even then it was not quite enough. The conductor was kind and let me ride the last leg without a ticket when I explained my situation." Owen felt anger flash through him, not at her, but at whatever circumstances had reduced her to such straits. Olivia Langston was an educated, respectable woman, a school teacher with means enough to travel and help family. For her to have been brought so low spoke of serious misfortune. "The hotel has a dining room," Owen said, guiding her toward the street. "I am going to feed you properly, and then you are going to tell me everything. And Olivia, no matter what happened, we will face it together. Do you understand? You are not alone anymore." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks at his words, and she nodded, leaning into him as they walked. Owen was acutely aware of how fragile she felt, how much weight she had lost. Whatever she had been through, it had clearly been an ordeal that had tested her to her limits. The Old Tucson Hotel was a modest but respectable establishment on the main street, catering to travelers and occasional visitors to the territorial capital. Owen led Olivia into the dining room, which was quiet in the mid-afternoon lull between lunch and dinner. He settled her at a corner table and immediately ordered a full meal, coffee, water, and bread to start. The waitress, a middle-aged woman named Betty who knew Owen from his regular visits to town, took one look at Olivia's exhausted face and hurried off to fulfill the order with unusual speed. While they waited for the food, Owen sat across from Olivia and took both her hands in his across the table. Now that the initial shock of her arrival was fading, he could see her more clearly. She was still beautiful, her bone structure too good to be hidden by weight loss or exhaustion, but she looked like someone who had been through a war. Her traveling dress, while clean, was patched in places and showed signs of hard wear. Her hands were rougher than he remembered, with calluses that had not been there before. "Start at the beginning," he said gently. "Tell me what happened after you left Santa Fe to return to Missouri." Olivia took a sip of the water Betty had brought, her hands shaking slightly as she lifted the glass. "I made it back to my aunt's house safely," she began, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "She was recovering well, and I began making arrangements to settle her affairs so I could come to you as we planned. But 2 weeks after I arrived, my uncle appeared. She said the word uncle with such venom that Owen felt his jaw tighten. "I did not know you had an uncle," he said carefully. "He is my father's brother, and he is a terrible man," Olivia said, her eyes hardening. "My father cut ties with him years ago because of his drinking and his gambling and his generally dissolute character. We had not heard from him in over a decade. But somehow he learned that my aunt, his sister-in-law, had broken her leg and that I was there caring for her. More importantly, he learned that my aunt had recently come into a substantial inheritance from her late husband's estate. A piece of property in Kansas City had sold for a considerable sum. Owen felt a cold weight settling in his stomach. "He came for the money," he said. "He came with a lawyer and legal documents," Olivia said bitterly. "Documents that he claimed gave him power of attorney over my aunt's affairs due to her injury and advanced age. My aunt protested, told him to leave, but he was insistent. The documents appeared legitimate, with official seals and signatures. My aunt was frightened, and honestly, so was I. This man was family by blood, but he was essentially a stranger, and he had brought with him a sense of menace that was truly disturbing." Betty returned with bread and butter, and Olivia paused to take a piece, eating it slowly as if her stomach was no longer accustomed to regular meals. Owen waited patiently, though every instinct in him wanted to demand the rest of the story immediately. "My uncle moved into the house," Olivia continued after a moment. "He said it was his right as family to stay there while he sorted out my aunt's financial affairs. Within a week, it became clear that his intentions were not to help but to steal. He was going through my aunt's papers, pressuring her to sign documents, making arrangements to sell her house and property. When I confronted him, he became angry. He said that I was interfering in family business and that if I did not leave, he would make trouble for me. But you stayed," Owen said, knowing her character well enough to predict her actions. "I could not abandon my aunt," Olivia said simply. She was terrified of him, and her health was declining under the stress. "I refused to leave, and that was when things became truly difficult. My uncle realized that I was the main obstacle to his plans. As long as I was there advocating for my aunt and questioning his actions, he could not simply take control of her assets and disappear." The main course arrived, a thick stew with vegetables and cornbread, and Owen watched Olivia eat with the careful attention of someone making sure she did not make herself sick by eating too quickly after going hungry. She took small bites, pacing herself despite obvious hunger. "One night my uncle came to my room," Olivia said quietly, staring down at her bowl. "He was drunk, and he told me that I had a choice. I could leave quietly, immediately, with nothing but what I could carry, or he would make accusations against me. False accusations of theft or worse. He had friends in the local sheriff's office, he said, men who would believe his word over mine. He said he would see me arrested and imprisoned if I did not get out of his way." Owen felt rage building in his chest, hot and fierce. The thought of this man threatening Olivia, terrifying her in her own home, made him want to find the nearest horse and ride straight to Missouri to deliver the justice this uncle clearly deserved. But he forced himself to remain calm to listen, because Olivia needed to tell this story more than he needed to react to it. "I still might have stayed and fought him," Olivia said, "but then my aunt begged me to go. She said she could not bear the thought of me being arrested because of her, that she would rather lose her money than see me imprisoned. She made me promise to leave, to go somewhere safe. She gave me what money she could hide from my uncle, about $200, and told me to go to you. She said that you seemed like a good man and that I should not let her troubles prevent me from finding happiness. So you left," Owen said. "I left in the middle of the night with one trunk of belongings," Olivia confirmed. I took a stage to Kansas City, planning to go directly to the railroad station and purchase a ticket to Arizona Territory. But when I arrived in Kansas City, I discovered that my uncle had been busy. He had somehow sent word ahead, possibly telegrams to associates, and there were men looking for me. Men who claimed I had stolen from my aunt and fled with her money. Owen swore under his breath, and Olivia gave him a wan smile. "My thoughts exactly," she said. "I realized that I could not simply buy a ticket and leave. If I used my real name, I would be arrested, so I had to disappear. I found a boarding house in a rough part of the city where they did not ask questions, and I stayed there while I tried to figure out what to do. I sold my jewelry, most of my clothes, everything of value except absolute necessities. I changed my appearance, cutting my hair short and dressing in plainer clothing. I took work where I could find it, cleaning houses and doing laundry, earning just enough to eat and pay for my room while I saved for the train fare. That is why you could not send word," Owen realized. "You could not risk using your real name. I tried to send you a telegram once, about a month after I left Missouri," Olivia said. "But the clerk at the telegraph office asked for my name, and I panicked. I was afraid that somehow my uncle was monitoring communications, looking for me. It sounds paranoid, but Owen, you did not see this man. He was obsessed with that money, and he would have done anything to eliminate obstacles in his path. I could not risk leading him to you, to Old Tucson, to anywhere I might go. So you worked and saved in Kansas City for 3 months, Owen said, piecing together her ordeal. The ticket to Arizona Territory was expensive, Olivia said. Much more than I had anticipated, and I had to eat, had to pay for my room. Every week I thought I was getting close, and then something would happen. I got sick and could not work for a week, losing both wages and paying for medicine. My boarding house raised the rent. I was robbed once, losing nearly $30 I had hidden in my room. It felt like the universe was conspiring to keep me from reaching you." She looked up at him then, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "There were so many times I almost gave up, Owen. So many nights when I lay in that terrible room in that terrible boarding house and wondered if I should just accept that we were not meant to be together. I thought about you constantly, wondered if you were still waiting or if you had decided I was not coming. I had nightmares that you had met someone else, or that you had forgotten about me entirely. The only thing that kept me going was remembering your face, remembering how you held my hands in Santa Fe and asked me to build a life with you." Owen stood up abruptly, moving around the table to sit beside her instead of across from her. He pulled her into his arms again, feeling her collapse against him with a shuddering sigh. "I never forgot," he said fiercely. "Not for one single day. I never doubted that you would come if you could. I have been waiting for you, Olivia, and I would have waited another 3 months, another year, however long it took." They sat like that for a long moment, drawing comfort from each other's presence. The dining room had filled up slightly with early dinner guests, but no one bothered them. Betty refilled their coffee cups quietly and left them alone, recognizing a significant moment when she saw one. Finally, Olivia pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes with a napkin. "I finally had enough money saved for the ticket 2 weeks ago," she said, her voice steadier now. "I went to the station at dawn, when it was less likely anyone would recognize me, and I bought passage to Old Tucson using a false name. The journey took 8 days with all the stops and transfers. I was so afraid something else would go wrong, that I would be stopped or the money would be stolen or the train would break down, but I made it. I am here." "You are here," Owen repeated, still marveling at that simple fact, "and you are safe now. Whatever trouble your uncle might cause, he cannot reach you here, Arizona territory is a long way from Missouri, and you have me to protect you now." "Owen," Olivia said hesitantly, "there is something else you need to know. I understand if this changes things between us. I know we made plans, and I know you have been waiting, but my circumstances have changed so much. I have almost nothing now. No money, no possessions of value, no prospects. I cannot even legally use my real name for fear of being arrested on false charges. I am not the same woman you asked to marry you in Santa Fe. I do not want you to feel obligated to honor a promise made to someone who no longer exists." Owen stared at her in genuine shock. "Olivia Langston," he said firmly, taking her face in his hands again, "you listen to me. I did not fall in love with your possessions or your prospects. I fell in love with you. Your kindness, your intelligence, your strength of character. If anything, learning what you have been through these past 3 months makes me even more certain that you are the woman I want to spend my life with. You survived an ordeal that would have broken many people. You worked and struggled and refused to give up. You are exactly the same woman I met in Santa Fe, only now I know for certain that you are even more remarkable than I first realized." "But I have nothing," Olivia whispered. "You have me," Owen said, "and I have enough for both of us. I have a good job, money saved, and I built us a house. A real house, Olivia, waiting for you. For us. I do not care about anything else. All that matters is that you are here and you are safe and we can finally begin the life we planned." Fresh tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks, but this time they seemed to be tears of relief rather than distress. "I was so afraid," she admitted. "So afraid that I would arrive and you would not be there, or that you would be there but everything would have changed." "I was there," Owen said. "I was there every single day. And nothing has changed except that now I understand what an incredibly strong woman you are. Now, I think we need to make some decisions. It is late afternoon now. We can get you a room here at the hotel for tonight so you can rest properly, and tomorrow we can go to the ranch. I want to show you the house I built. I want to take you home, Olivia." She nodded, exhaustion clearly overtaking her now that the adrenaline of arrival was fading. "That sounds perfect," she said. "Owen, I need to ask you something, though. You mentioned I have you and you talked about the house being for us. Does that mean you still want to marry me? After everything?" "More than ever," Owen said without hesitation. "But we will do things properly. You need time to recover from your journey to regain your strength and feel secure. We will court properly, here where people can see that everything is respectable and above board. And when you are ready, truly ready, we will marry. There is no rush. I have already waited 3 months. I can wait a bit longer to do things right." Olivia smiled then, the first genuine smile he had seen from her since her arrival, and it transformed her face, bringing back the radiant woman he remembered from Santa Fe. "You are a good man, Owen Parker," she said. "Better than I probably deserve." "You deserve everything good in this world," Owen said firmly. "And I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it." He arranged for a room for her at the hotel, paying for a week in advance despite her protests. He also arranged for hot water to be brought up so she could have a proper bath, and he sent Betty to the general store to purchase some basic necessities: a nightgown, soap, a brush for her hair. Olivia tried to object to the expense, but Owen was adamant. "You are going to rest and recover," he told her as he walked her up to her room. "Tomorrow I will come by mid-morning and we will talk more about everything. We have time now, Olivia. Time to figure everything out together." At the door to her room, Owen pulled her into his arms one more time, holding her gently but securely. "I am so glad you are here," he whispered into her hair. "I am so incredibly glad." "So am I," Olivia whispered back. Thank you for waiting, Owen. Thank you for having faith in me. Always, he promised. He forced himself to leave then, to let her rest, though every instinct in him wanted to stay, to keep her in sight, to assure himself that she was truly here and safe. But she needed sleep and recovery, and he needed to make preparations. Tomorrow would be the beginning of their real life together, and he wanted everything to be perfect. The ride back to the ranch took 40 minutes, and Owen spent every moment of it thinking, planning, adjusting the future he had imagined to accommodate the reality of Olivia's situation. She was essentially a fugitive, unable to use her real name for fear of false legal troubles. That would complicate things like getting married, but Owen was not concerned. Arizona Territory was a place where people often came to start over, where questions about the past were considered impolite. They would figure it out. When he arrived at the ranch, Marcus was waiting near the bunkhouse, clearly having heard through the small town grapevine that something significant had happened at the train station. "Well," Marcus demanded as Owen dismounted. "Was it her? Did she finally arrive?" "She is here," Owen said, unable to keep the smile off his face. "She is here and she is safe." Marcus let out a whoop of joy and clapped Owen on the shoulder hard enough to nearly knock him over. "About time." "I swear, Owen, I thought you were going to wear a hole in that train platform with your pacing. What happened? Where has she been?" Owen gave him the abbreviated version, leaving out some of the more concerning details about Olivia's uncle and the false accusations. Marcus listened with growing anger, particularly at the parts about Olivia being forced to flee and work in poverty to afford her train fare. "That is a hell of an ordeal for a woman to go through alone," Marcus said when Owen finished. "But she made it, and that is what matters. So what now?" "When is the wedding?" "Soon," Owen said. "But I want to give her time to settle in, to feel secure. She has been through so much. I do not want to rush her." "Fair enough," Marcus agreed. "You need help with anything, want us to clean up that house you built, make sure it is ready for her." "That would be appreciated," Owen admitted. "I have kept it clean, but a few extra hands to make sure everything is perfect would be welcome." "Tomorrow morning, consider it done," Marcus said. "The boys will be happy to help. We have all been invested in this romance of yours, you know. It will be nice to see it have a happy ending after all the worry." That night, Owen lay in his bunk in the ranch house unable to sleep, his mind full of Olivia. She was here. After 3 months of waiting, of hoping, of struggling to maintain faith when everything seemed hopeless, she was here. The relief was almost overwhelming, but so was the anger at what she had been forced to endure. Her uncle, whoever he was, had put her through hell for the sake of money. The injustice of it burned in Owen's gut, but dwelling on the past would not help anyone. What mattered now was the future, and building the life together that they had both fought so hard to achieve. Olivia had proven herself to be exactly the kind of woman he wanted as a partner, someone with courage and determination and loyalty. She could have given up dozens of times during her ordeal, but had not. She had kept going, kept working toward her goal of reaching him. That kind of strength was rare and precious. The next morning dawned clear and beautiful, the September weather mild and pleasant. Owen was up before dawn, helping with the morning ranch work before heading into town to meet Olivia. He found himself nervous as he rode toward Old Tucson, a fluttering in his chest that felt absurd for a man of 27. But this was the beginning of everything, the first real day of their courtship and their life together, and he wanted it to be right. He found Olivia in the hotel dining room having breakfast. She looked dramatically better after a night of rest and proper sleep. The shadows under her eyes were less pronounced, and she had color in her cheeks again. She wore the same traveling dress as yesterday, her only outfit until they could arrange for new clothes. but she looked clean and refreshed. "Good morning," Owen said, removing his hat as he approached her table. "How did you sleep?" "Like the dead," Olivia admitted with a slight laugh. "I cannot remember the last time I slept in a real bed with clean sheets and no worries about being robbed in the night. It was heavenly." "Good," Owen said, sitting down across from her. "I am glad. Are you feeling up to a ride out to the ranch today? I want to show you the house, and I thought we could talk more about everything, make plans." Olivia nodded eagerly. "I would love that. Owen, I want to see this house you built. You mentioned it yesterday, and I have been imagining it all night." They finished breakfast together, talking about lighter things, carefully avoiding the heavy topics of the previous day. Owen told her about the ranch, about his work and his friends. Olivia told him about her time as a schoolteacher in Missouri, the students she had taught, and the books she had loved. It was the kind of conversation they should have been having for months, getting to know each other better, learning the small details that made up a life. Owen had borrowed a gentle mare from the ranch for Olivia to ride, and they set out together under the morning sun. The ride took them through typical Arizona Territory landscape, all browns and golds under the vast blue sky, with mountains rising in the distance. Olivia looked around with evident interest, taking in the scenery with the eyes of someone seeing it for the first time. "It is so different from Missouri," she said. "Everything is so open, so spacious, and the sky seems bigger somehow." "Wait until you see a sunset here," Owen said. "The whole sky turns colors you would not believe possible. Purple and orange and red, like the world is on fire." The house Owen had built sat on a small rise about a mile from the main ranch buildings, giving it privacy while still being close enough for community and safety. As they approached, Owen watched Olivia's face anxiously, trying to gauge her reaction. It was not a grand house, just 2 rooms and a porch, but he had built it with care and love, and it represented all his hopes for their future. Olivia reined in her horse and sat staring at the house for a long moment in silence. Owen felt his anxiety rising. Was she disappointed? Had she expected something different, something better? Then she turned to him with tears streaming down her face. "You built this for me," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You built a house for me, for us," Owen corrected gently. "I built it for us." They dismounted and Owen helped her down, his hands lingering at her waist. Then he led her up onto the porch, opening the door that had no lock because he had never needed one, and ushered her inside. The main room was simple, but welcoming. The stone fireplace he had built with his own hands dominated one wall. The table and chairs he had purchased sat near the window where morning light would stream in. The rocking chair he had imagined her sitting in waited on the porch. Through the open door to the second room, the bed with its real mattress and the trunk where they would keep clothes were visible. Olivia walked slowly through the space, touching things gently, reverently. She traced her fingers along the mantel of the fireplace, examined the handmade shelves Owen had installed for books and dishes, peered into the bedroom with its simple but sturdy furniture. When she turned back to him, she was openly crying. "It is perfect," she said. "Owen, it is absolutely perfect. I have spent the last 3 months living in terrible places, rough boarding houses and worse, and I tried to remember that I was working toward something better. But I could not even imagine something this wonderful. You built us a home." Owen crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, feeling her tears soak into his shirt. "I wanted you to have a real home," he said. "A place where you would always be safe and comfortable and happy. A place that is ours, Olivia, where we can build a life together." They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the house that represented everything they had fought for. Outside, birds sang and the Arizona breeze rustled through the sparse grass. Inside, two people who had been tested by circumstance and separation finally had the chance to simply be together. Eventually, they moved out to the porch, sitting together in the rocking chair that was really only built for one person, but accommodated both of them if they squeezed close together. Owen kept his arm around Olivia's shoulders, and she leaned her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "We need to talk about practical things," Owen said reluctantly, not wanting to break the peaceful moment but knowing it was necessary. "About your situation and how we can resolve it." Olivia sighed. "I know. I have been thinking about it too. I cannot use my real name, at least not safely, which means I cannot legally marry you as Olivia Langston. But I do not want to live a lie either, to build our life together on a false foundation. What if we contact a lawyer?" Owen suggested. "Explain the situation and see if there is a legal way to clear your name. Your uncle made false accusations against you. Surely there is a way to prove that and have the charges dismissed or whatever needs to happen." "That would require going back to Missouri or Kansas City," Olivia said quietly. "Facing my uncle and his associates. I am not sure I am brave enough for that, Owen. And honestly, I am not sure it would work. My uncle was connected, had friends in positions of authority. He seemed very confident that he could make accusations stick." Owen thought about that for a moment, his mind working through possibilities. "What about your aunt?" he asked. "You said she is the one your uncle was stealing from. Would she testify on your behalf if we could get her away from your uncle's influence?" Olivia sat up slightly, looking at him with surprise. "I had not thought of that. She was fond of me, and she was horrified by what my uncle was doing, but she is elderly and not in good health. I do not know if she would be strong enough to fight him, especially if it meant going to court or making official statements. We would need to find out if she is even safe," Owen said, troubled. "Your uncle was after her money. Once you were gone and no longer interfering, what is to stop him from simply taking everything and leaving her destitute?" Guilt washed over Olivia's face. "I have been trying not to think about that," she admitted. "I left her in a terrible situation, but she begged me to go. She said she could not bear to see me arrested because of her problems. But you are right. Without me there to advocate for her, she is completely at my uncle's mercy." They sat in troubled silence for a few minutes, the joy of their reunion now tempered by the reality of unresolved problems. Owen had hoped that Olivia's arrival would mean a simple, happy beginning to their life together, but clearly the past was not going to release them quite so easily. "I do not want to go back," Olivia said softly. "I am afraid to go back, Owen. But I also cannot live with myself if something terrible happens to my aunt because I ran away." "You did not run away," Owen said firmly. "You were forced out by threats and intimidation. There is a difference, but I understand what you are saying. The not knowing would eat at you, would poison our happiness together." "So what do we do?" Olivia asked. Owen was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he said slowly, "What if I went back to Missouri, not you but me? I could try to find your aunt, see what her situation is, maybe even bring her back here if she needs help. I could also talk to a lawyer, find out what it would take to clear your name legally. You would stay here, safe in Old Tucson, where your uncle cannot reach you." "Absolutely not," Olivia said immediately, sitting up fully to face him. "Owen, no, I am not sending you into danger on my behalf. You do not know my uncle or the kind of man he is. If he felt threatened by you, I do not know what he might do." "I can handle myself," Owen said. "And I would be careful. But Olivia, we need to resolve this somehow. We cannot build a life together with this hanging over us, with you afraid to use your real name and worried about your aunt. Let me try to help. Let me do this for you." They argued about it for over an hour, with Olivia adamantly refusing to let Owen put himself at risk, and Owen equally adamant that something needed to be done. Finally, they agreed to a compromise. They would send inquiries first, carefully worded telegrams and letters to try to determine Olivia's aunt's situation without alerting her uncle. Depending on what they learned, they would decide what further action might be needed. In the meantime, they would focus on building their life together in Old Tucson. Olivia would stay at the hotel for the sake of propriety while they courted properly, but they would see each other daily. Owen would introduce her to people in town, help her establish herself in the community. When enough time had passed for propriety's sake, they would marry, using whatever name Olivia felt safest using. Over the following weeks, this plan unfolded gradually. Owen introduced Olivia to his boss Samuel Richmond and his wife Martha, and the older couple immediately took to her. Martha, who had been hoping Owen would find a good woman to settle down with, was particularly welcoming. She invited Olivia to tea, introduced her to other women in the community, and helped her acquire a proper wardrobe to replace the few worn items she had arrived with. The town of Old Tucson gradually came to know Olivia, though Owen had advised her to use a slightly modified version of her name, introducing herself as Liv Langford, close enough to her real name that she would answer naturally but different enough to avoid any potential problems if her uncle was still searching for her. Most people in the territory did not ask too many questions about the past anyway, understanding that many had come west to escape something or start over. Olivia visited the small schoolhouse in Old Tucson and spoke with the current teacher, mentioning that she had teaching experience. There was talk of the school needing an additional teacher if enrollment continued to grow, and the seed was planted that Liv Langford might be a good candidate for such a position. It gave Olivia a sense of purpose and possibility, something to work toward beyond just recovering from her ordeal. Every few days, Owen and Olivia would ride out to their house, and Owen would show her improvements he was making. He expanded the garden, built a small shed for storage, reinforced the porch. Olivia would bring fabric and sew curtains for the windows, or she would arrange the few books she had managed to keep onto the shelves Owen had built. Slowly, together, they were transforming the house from an empty structure into a real home. They also sent careful inquiries about Olivia's aunt. Owen telegraphed a lawyer in Kansas City who had been recommended by Samuel Richmond, explaining the situation in vague terms and asking for advice. The response was not encouraging. Without proof of the false accusations being false, and without Olivia's aunt willing to come forward and contradict her brother-in-law's claims, there was little that could be done legally to clear Olivia's name from a distance. "We need testimony from someone who knows the truth," Owen explained to Olivia after receiving the lawyer's response. "Your aunt is the obvious choice, but we would need to get her away from your uncle's influence first, and we would need her to be willing to make an official statement." "I hate that he is getting away with this," Olivia said bitterly. They were sitting on the porch of their house, watching the sun set in exactly the spectacular display of color Owen had promised. "He is a thief and a bully, and he is winning because he was willing to be more ruthless than we are." "He is not winning," Owen said quietly. "You are here safe with me. We are building a life together. He did not break you, Olivia. You survived and you are thriving. That is not him winning." She leaned against him, her anger fading into weariness. "I suppose you are right. But I would still like to see justice done." "Maybe we will find a way," Owen said. "But in the meantime, let us focus on what we can control. Speaking of which, I have something I want to ask you." He shifted slightly, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small box. Olivia's eyes widened as he opened it to reveal a simple gold ring with a small but pretty stone set in it. "I bought this the week before you were supposed to arrive the first time," Owen said. "I have been carrying it with me every day since, waiting for the right moment. Olivia Langston, or Liv Langford, or whatever name you want to use, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and let me be your husband? Will you build this life with me, whatever comes?" Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said. "Yes, of course, yes. I have been yours since Santa Fe, Owen Parker. 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he kissed her properly for the first time since her arrival, a kiss that held months of waiting and hoping and loving. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and laughing. "When?" Owen asked. "When can we get married?" "Soon," Olivia said. "I do not want to wait any more. We have waited long enough, do not you think?" They decided on a date 3 weeks away, time enough to arrange a proper wedding, but not so long as to feel like more unnecessary delay. Martha Richmond offered to help Olivia prepare, treating her like the daughter she had never had. The other ranch hands offered to help make the house even nicer for Owen's bride. The whole community of Old Tucson seemed invested in seeing this long-delayed romance finally reach its happy conclusion. But 2 weeks before the wedding, a telegram arrived for Owen that changed everything. It was from a lawyer in Missouri, not the one Owen had contacted, but someone else entirely. The message was brief but significant. It said that a woman named Eunice Langston had contacted them seeking help to locate her niece, Olivia Langston. She wished to report that her brother-in-law, who had been attempting to steal her inheritance, had been arrested for fraud after she had gone to the authorities with evidence of his schemes. She wanted Olivia to know that she was safe, that the false accusations had been withdrawn, and that Olivia was free to return home or live wherever else she wished without fear of legal trouble. Owen showed the telegram to Olivia with shaking hands. She read it 3 times as if unable to believe what it said. "My aunt stood up to him," she said, wonder in her voice. "She actually went to the authorities and had him arrested, but she was so frightened of him, so intimidated. What changed?" "Maybe she found her courage once you were safe," Owen suggested. "Maybe knowing you had escaped gave her the strength to fight back. Or maybe she just reached her limit," Olivia said. "My aunt was always stronger than she appeared. She raised 3 children alone after her husband died young. She survived poverty and hardship. Maybe once I was out of harm's way, she decided it was time to put an end to my uncle's schemes." They immediately sent a return telegram, expressing relief at the news and asking for more details. Over the following days, they learned through a series of telegrams and a long letter that Olivia's aunt had indeed found the courage to report her brother-in-law's attempted theft to the authorities. She had kept records of his schemes, copies of documents he had forged, testimony from neighbors who had witnessed his threatening behavior. Once Olivia was safely gone, she had taken all of this evidence to a lawyer and then to the sheriff. The investigation had revealed that Olivia's uncle was wanted for similar schemes in 2 other states. He was currently in jail, awaiting trial on multiple counts of fraud and attempted theft. The false accusations against Olivia had been formally withdrawn, and there was no impediment to her using her real name or going wherever she wished. "I am free," Olivia said, staring at the letter in disbelief. "I can use my own name again. I am not a fugitive or a criminal. I am just me." "You were always just you," Owen said, pulling her close. "But I am glad the legal troubles are resolved. Does this change anything for us? Do you want to go back to Missouri, see your aunt?" Olivia considered that for a long moment. "I would like to see my aunt again someday," she admitted. Maybe we could visit her, or she could visit us here. But Old Tucson is my home now, Owen. You are my home. I do not want to go back to Missouri to stay. I want to stay here and marry you and build the life we have been planning." The wedding took place on a bright October morning with the whole town of Old Tucson seemingly in attendance. Olivia wore a simple but beautiful dress that Martha had helped her make, cream-colored with blue accents that matched Owen's eyes. Owen wore his best suit, cleaned and pressed until it looked almost new. They stood together in the small church with a circuit preacher officiating and exchanged vows that felt more meaningful for having been delayed and fought for. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed his bride with such joy and relief that the assembled guests burst into spontaneous applause. They were married. After everything, all the waiting and worry and obstacles, they were finally married. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside and food contributed by seemingly everyone in the territory. There was music and dancing, and Owen danced with his wife until they were both dizzy and laughing. Marcus gave a toast that was equal parts sentimental and teasing, making everyone laugh. Martha cried happy tears and hugged them both. Samuel presented them with a generous monetary gift to help furnish their home. As the sun set, painting the sky in those impossible colors Owen had promised, he and Olivia slipped away from the party. They rode together out to their house, their home, where everything was ready and waiting. Owen carried Olivia over the threshold, both of them laughing at the silly tradition, and then they were alone together for the first time as husband and wife. "We made it," Olivia said softly, looking around the home that had waited so long for her arrival. "After everything, we actually made it." "I never doubted," Owen said, which was not quite true but felt true enough. "From the moment I saw you on that platform, 3 months late but here, I knew we would make it." That night was the beginning of their real life together, and it was everything they had hoped for and more. Over the following months, they settled into the rhythms of married life with the ease of two people who were genuinely well-matched. Olivia did indeed become a teacher at the Old Tucson school when a second position opened up in the spring. Owen continued his work at the ranch, respected and valued by his employer and fellow workers alike. They had their challenges, of course. Money was sometimes tight, and the Arizona territory was not an easy place to live, with its harsh weather and occasional dangers. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. When Olivia fell ill with a fever one winter, Owen nursed her back to health with devoted care. When Owen was injured roping a particularly stubborn steer, Olivia kept the household running and refused to let him do anything foolish before he was fully healed. Olivia's Aunt Eunice did eventually come to visit, making the long journey from Missouri at age 68 with a determination that reminded Owen very much of her niece. She stayed for 2 months, delighting in the house Owen had built and the life her beloved niece had made in the West. Before she returned to Missouri, she told Owen privately that she had never seen Olivia so happy, so genuinely settled and content. "You are good for her," Eunice said, "and she is good for you. When she told me about meeting you in Santa Fe, I hoped it would work out, but I was not sure." The world has a way of interfering with happiness, but you two fought for each other, and that is worth everything. A year and a half after their marriage, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. The joy and terror of impending parenthood sent them both into a flurry of preparation. They expanded the house, adding a third room that would serve as a nursery. Martha Richmond organized the women of Old Tucson to help prepare baby clothes and blankets. Owen worried constantly about Olivia's health and safety, having heard too many stories about the dangers of childbirth. But Olivia sailed through her pregnancy with remarkable ease. staying active and teaching at the school until just a few weeks before her due date. When her labor began on a warm July evening, Martha and the doctor were both present, and Owen paced outside the bedroom door like a caged animal until he heard the lusty cry of a newborn baby. "You have a son," Martha announced, opening the door with a wide smile. "A healthy, strong boy. Come meet him." Owen entered the room cautiously, almost afraid to breathe, and found Olivia propped up in bed looking exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. She looked up at him with tears of joy streaming down her face. "Meet your son," she said softly. "Meet James Owen Parker." Owen approached the bed and looked down at the impossibly small creature his wife held. His son had a shock of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face, and he was the most beautiful thing Owen had ever seen besides his mother. He reached out tentatively to touch one tiny, perfect hand, and the baby's fingers immediately closed around his own with surprising strength. "James," Owen said, his voice breaking slightly. "Hello, James, I am your father," Olivia laughed softly. "We are parents now, Owen, can you believe it?" "No," Owen admitted, unable to take his eyes off his son. "But I like it." Parenthood transformed them in ways both expected and surprising. Owen discovered reserves of patience he had not known he possessed, walking the floor with a crying baby at 3 in the morning while Olivia tried to catch a few precious hours of sleep. Olivia found that the fierce protectiveness of motherhood was even stronger than she had imagined, making her willing to fight off anything that threatened her child. They grew even closer as partners, working together to navigate the challenges of raising a baby while maintaining their household and their work. The ranch hands helped when they could, and Marcus in particular became an honorary uncle to young James, showing up regularly to play with the baby and give Owen and Olivia occasional breaks. When James was 6 months old, Olivia received a letter from her Aunt Eunice with unexpected news. Her uncle, the man who had caused so much trouble, had died in prison of a heart ailment. Olivia's first emotion was relief that he could no longer threaten anyone, followed quickly by a complicated mix of other feelings. He had been family, however terrible, and his death still meant something. "Are you all right?" Owen asked, watching his wife's face carefully as she read the letter. "I think so," Olivia said slowly. "Mostly I just feel relieved that this chapter is fully closed now. He cannot hurt anyone else. My aunt is safe and secure. I am here with you and James, living a life I love. Justice was done in its own way." "Justice and then mercy," Owen agreed. "We get to move forward without looking over our shoulders anymore." And they did move forward, building a life of genuine happiness in Old Tucson. James grew from a baby into a toddler, then a little boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's steady nature. 2 years after James was born, Olivia had a daughter they named Rose Martha Parker after the wild roses that grew near their home, and Martha Richmond, who had become like a mother to Olivia. Rose was a spirited child from birth, keeping them all on their toes with her energy and curiosity. Owen eventually became part owner of the ranch when Samuel Richmond decided to take on a partner rather than an employee. It gave the Parker family greater financial security and allowed them to expand their home again, adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper sitting room. Olivia continued teaching, though she reduced her hours to spend more time with the children. She became known as one of the best teachers in the territory, patient and creative, and genuinely caring about her students. The years passed with the gentle rhythm of a life well lived. There were hard times, of course. A drought one year that tested everyone's resources. Illness that swept through the territory. The normal struggles of raising children and maintaining a home and making a living in a sometimes harsh land. But through it all, Owen and Olivia faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each challenge overcome. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they stood together on the porch of their home, now significantly larger and more established than the simple two-room house Owen had first built. Their children were playing in the yard, James now 9 years old and teaching his 6-year-old sister to rope a fence post. The sun was setting in its spectacular Arizona fashion, painting the sky in impossible colors. "You remember the day you arrived?" Owen asked, his arm around Olivia's waist. "3 months late, and I was standing on that platform like I had been every day, and suddenly there you were." "I remember thinking you looked so tired," Olivia said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "So worn down from waiting. And I remember the relief of seeing you there, of knowing you had not given up on me." "I would never give up on you," Owen said. "Not in 3 months, not in a lifetime. You are everything to me, Olivia. You and our children and this life we have built." "We have built a good life," Olivia agreed. "Better than I ever imagined that day on the train when I was so afraid you would not be waiting anymore. Better than I dreamed possible during those terrible months in Kansas City when I thought I might never make it here." "You did make it here, though," Owen said. "You fought your way here, and we fought our way to this moment. Together." "Together," Olivia echoed, and she turned in his arms to kiss him, a kiss that still held all the love and passion of their early days but was now enriched by years of partnership and shared experience. The children called out for their attention, some minor crisis requiring parental intervention, and Owen and Olivia broke apart with a laugh. They walked down from the porch together, hand in hand, ready to deal with whatever their children needed. It was an ordinary moment in an ordinary evening, the kind that made up the substance of a life. But to Owen and Olivia, who had fought so hard to have this ordinary, beautiful life together, it was precious beyond measure. Years continued to unfold, bringing more changes and challenges. James grew into a serious, thoughtful young man who eventually took over much of the ranch work alongside his father. Rose became a teacher like her mother, though with her own unique style that was perhaps a bit less patient and more adventurous. Owen and Olivia had one more child, another son they named Samuel Marcus Parker, honoring both Samuel Richmond and Owen's good friend Marcus. Samuel was a surprise late baby, born when Olivia was 40, and they had thought their family was complete, but he was welcomed with joy and love. As Owen and Olivia aged, their love deepened rather than diminished. They became the couple that younger people in Old Tucson looked to as an example, proof that true love could exist and endure. They became grandparents when James married a sweet young woman named Catherine and had 3 children of his own. Rose married a fellow teacher and had 2 daughters who were as spirited as their mother. Even young Samuel eventually married and brought his wife to live at the expanded Parker homestead, which had grown into a proper family compound. On their 30th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Owen and Olivia renewed their vows in the same small church where they had first married. Owen's hair was now silver at the temples, and Olivia wore reading glasses more often than not, but they stood together holding hands with the same love and devotion they had felt as young people. 30 years ago, I stood on a train platform every single day for 3 months, waiting for you," Owen said during the renewal ceremony, speaking to Olivia but aware of their audience. "People thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. But I knew, somehow I knew, that you would come if you possibly could. And when you finally arrived, 3 months late but here, it was worth every single day of waiting." "I fought my way across half the country to get here," Olivia said, her voice still strong despite her age. I worked and struggled and refused to give up because I knew you were waiting. And when I finally stepped off that train and saw you standing there, still waiting after all that time, I knew I was home. You have been my home ever since, Owen Parker. My home and my heart." There was not a dry eye in the church by the time they finished speaking. Even the grandchildren, who sometimes rolled their eyes at their grandparents' obvious affection, were moved by the depth of love so clearly present between this elderly couple who had fought so hard to be together. The years that followed were golden ones. Owen eventually retired from active ranch work, though he never stopped being involved in decisions and management. Olivia retired from teaching at age 62, her last students giving her a tearful farewell that included speeches and gifts and promises to write. They spent more time together, taking walks in the cool of the evening, sitting on their porch watching grandchildren play, traveling occasionally to visit Olivia's Aunt Eunice before she passed away at the impressive age of 93. When Owen was 70 years old and Olivia 68, they decided to write down their story for their children and grandchildren, wanting to preserve the tale of how they met and fell in love and fought their way to happiness. They spent long evenings together remembering and recording everything, from their first meeting in Santa Fe to the 3 months of separation, to Owen's faithful waiting and Olivia's difficult journey. They wrote about the house Owen built, about their wedding, about the births of their children and the growth of their family. "I want them to know," Olivia explained to her daughter Rose, who had questioned why they were going to so much trouble. "I want future generations to understand that love is worth fighting for, that waiting is sometimes necessary, that faith and devotion matter." "We already know that, Mother," Rose said gently. "You and Father have shown us every single day of our lives." "Then we have succeeded at the most important thing," Olivia said with satisfaction. Owen Parker passed away peacefully in his sleep at age 78, with Olivia beside him holding his hand, as she had held it so many times over their nearly 50 years of marriage. His last words to her were, "Worth the wait," which made her smile even through her tears. Olivia lived another 5 years after Owen's death, cared for by her children and surrounded by grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. She never remarried, saying that she had found her person and did not need to look for another. She spent her final years in the house Owen had built all those decades ago, the house that had been expanded and improved but still retained its original foundation and structure. On the anniversary of Owen's death each year, Olivia would sit on the porch in her rocking chair and tell anyone who would listen about the cowboy, who had waited every single day at the station for 3 months, refusing to give up faith that she would come. She told about the house he built with love, about the life they created together, about the absolute certainty that they had been meant for each other. "He waited for me," she would say, her old voice still firm with conviction. "Every single day for 3 months he stood on that platform and waited. And when I finally arrived, 3 months late and afraid he would have given up, there he was, still waiting, still believing in me. That is love, children. That is what real love looks like." When Olivia Langston Parker passed away in her sleep at age 73, surrounded by 3 generations of family, she was buried next to Owen in the Old Tucson cemetery. Their shared headstone bore their names, their dates, and a simple inscription that James had chosen. He waited. She came. Together forever. The house they built together remained in the Parker family, passed down through the generations. It was maintained carefully, preserved as a tribute to the love story that had begun with a 3-month wait at a train platform, and ended only when death temporarily separated 2 souls who had been destined for each other. Future Parker generations would bring their children to see the house, to hear the story of Owen and Olivia, to understand that true love was worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth building a life around in Old Tucson. The story became something of a legend. The station where Owen had waited was eventually replaced by a more modern structure, but old-timers would point out where the original platform had been, the exact spot where a faithful cowboy had stood every day for 3 months. They would tell newcomers about Owen Parker's vigil, about Olivia Langston's arduous journey, about the love that had overcome separation and hardship and doubt. And sometimes, on quiet afternoons when the train pulled in, locals would swear they could see the ghost of a young cowboy standing at the edge of the platform, hat in hands, waiting with patient devotion for the woman who would make his waiting worthwhile. It was just a story, of course, a romantic legend to go with the romantic history. But it spoke to something true and fundamental, something that Owen and Olivia had proven through their lives together. Love was worth waiting for. Love was worth fighting for. And when two people were truly meant for each other, no amount of time or distance or difficulty could ultimately keep them apart. They would find their way to each other, build a home together, create a family, and leave behind a legacy that would inspire generations to come. The Parker family thrived in Old Tucson for generations after Owen and Olivia, each new branch of the family tree bearing the mark of that original love story. They were known as people who loved deeply, who were faithful to their commitments, who understood that the best things in life often required patience and perseverance. The values that Owen and Olivia had embodied became woven into the fabric of their descendants' lives. James, their eldest, told his children and grandchildren about watching his father ride out every single day to meet the train, about the hope that never quite died in Owen's eyes even as weeks turned into months. He told them about the day Olivia finally arrived, how his father had come back to the ranch looking like a different man, all the exhaustion and worry replaced by pure joy. Rose told her students about her mother's courage in traveling alone across dangerous country, about working in poverty to save money for train fare, about refusing to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. She used Olivia's story to inspire young women to be strong, to persevere, to believe in themselves even when circumstances were difficult. And Samuel, the youngest, who had heard the story told and retold throughout his childhood, carried it with him as a reminder that the right person was worth waiting for. He did not marry until he was 35, having spent years searching for a love like his parents had shared. And when he finally found it, he knew with absolute certainty that the wait had been worthwhile. The legacy of Owen and Olivia Parker lived on not just in their descendants, but in the very culture of Old Tucson itself. The town that had watched a cowboy wait faithfully at the train station, that had welcomed a woman who arrived 3 months late, that had celebrated their eventual wedding with genuine joy, had been changed by that story. It became a place that valued loyalty, that understood true love, that believed in happy endings. And on certain quiet evenings, when the sun set in impossible colors over the Arizona landscape, when the wind whispered through the sparse grass and carried the scent of desert flowers, the spirit of that original love story seemed to hover over Old Tucson like a blessing. Two people who had loved each other enough to wait, to fight, to persevere against all odds, had created something beautiful and lasting. They had built a home, raised a family, lived a full and happy life together. They had proved that love was real, that it could conquer obstacles, that it was worth every sacrifice and every moment of waiting. And their story, passed down through generations, continued to inspire and encourage anyone who heard it, a testament to the enduring power of true love.